Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're tackling a topic that's particularly relevant for UPSC aspirants gearing up for that international relations paper.
Absolutely.
But really, anyone who's ever pondered the age-old questions of war and peace will find this fascinating.
I agree.
We're diving deep into excerpts from a prominent text on international relations, focusing specifically on the nature and types of war.
Lots to unpack there.
Definitely. Think of this as your cheat sheet to understanding this complex beast.
Right.
And maybe even acing those tricky exam questions.
Those are always tough.
Before we even jump into all the theories and historical examples,
Yeah.
we need to start with the basics.
Okay.
What even makes a conflict a war?
Right.
Is it just about the scale of the violence?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there something more to it?
Well, our source material jumps right into that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it highlights some key characteristics of war,
Okay.
emphasizing first and foremost conflict between political groups.
So not just random violence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be a clash of ideologies or interests.
Makes sense.
You also need an organized structure involved.
So we're talking armies.
Yeah, armies, strategic planning, that sort of thing.
So it's not just a bar fight.
No.
More organized.
Much more organized.
Okay.
And of course, it has to have a significant scale and duration to qualify as a war.
Right. It can't just be a brief skirmish.
Right, it has to have a lasting impact.
So it needs to leave a mark, so to speak.
Precisely.
But even with those guidelines defining war, can still get pretty murky, right?
Absolutely.
You know, the UN defines a major conflict as one with at least 1,000 deaths annually.
Yeah.
But then you have something like the Falklands War,
Right.
which everyone considers a war, even though it fell short of that threshold.
That's a great example.
Yeah, it really highlights the limitations of these strict definitions.
It does.
The Falklands War, though, relatively short
Uh-huh.
and with fewer casualties than some other conflicts.
Yeah.
It had profound political consequences
It
and really reshaped international relations in the region.
for sure.
It shows that sometimes the impact of a conflict,
Right.
its geopolitical ripple effects,
Yeah.
can be just as important as the sheer number of casualties
Absolutely.
when we're trying to define what a war really is.
I think that's key.
It's not just about the body count.
No.
It's about the lasting political shifts.
The impact.
The impact, exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of shifts,
Yes.
war itself isn't static.
Mm.
It's constantly adapting to new technologies and the world around it.
That's true.
I mean, think about the difference between the organized lines of musket-wielding soldiers from centuries past,
Okay.
and then compare that to the rapid mechanized warfare of something like the Blitzkrieg.
Completely different game.
Right. Huge
I-
shift.
And the socioeconomic context matters, too.
Oh, definitely.
Like, think about the rise of total war in the 20th century.
Right.
With the world wars being these most devastating examples.
Yeah.
Entire societies were mobilized for the war effort.
Blurring the lines between civilian and military life
Right.
and this concept of total war is something that UPSC aspirants
Definitely.
should definitely have a handle on.
For sure.
It really marked a turning point in how we understand the impact and scope of war.
Yeah, the scale of it changed.
For sure.
And the impact.
Exactly. And even within this broader category of war,
Right.
you have different scales and objectives, right?
Yeah.
You have these massive hegemonic wars,
Mm-hmm.
like World War II, aiming to reshape the entire global order.
That's right.
But then you also have more limited wars,
Yeah.
like the 1991 Gulf War or the Kosovo intervention,
Good examples.
with more focused objectives.
Much more focused.
Understanding this spectrum is crucial for analyzing conflicts in the real world.
Definitely.
A limited war might be about securing a specific territory or resource,
Uh-huh.
while a hegemonic war aims for nothing less than global dominance.
Yeah, that's the big one.
So for those prepping for the UPSC,
For sure.
being able to identify the type and scale of a conflict
Yes.
and understanding the motivations behind it
Right.
is key to crafting those insightful answers.
Definitely key.
It's like having different lenses to view conflict through.
Interesting way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use the same lens to examine a minor border skirmish
No.
as you would a global power struggle.
Completely different.
And speaking of different lenses,
Okay.
let's talk about unconventional warfare,
Okay.
something that's becoming increasingly relevant in today's world.
Absolutely.
So what makes a war unconventional?
Well, one aspect that immediately comes to mind
Okay.
is the potential use of nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons.
Right, those weapons of mass destruction
Exact.
with their indiscriminate and devastating effects.
Yeah,
They represent a terrifying category of unconventional warfare.
for sure.
But for now,
Okay.
let's focus on what some scholars call new wars.
New wars. Interesting.
So how do these new wars differ from the traditional interstate conflicts we've been talking about?
Well, think civil wars for starters.
Ah, okay.
These conflicts are often internal struggles for power or resources within a single state.
So instead of two countries duking it out,
Right.
it's more about factions within commandery fighting amongst themselves.
Precisely.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Right, I'm listening.
We're seeing a rise in non-state actors playing major roles in these conflicts.
Oh, right.
Think guerrilla groups, terrorist organizations, even private military companies.
Wow, so it's a very different landscape than the traditional battlefield.
It is.
Okay.
These actors often operate outside the traditional rules of war, making these conflicts even more complex and unpredictable.
So it's not just about armies clashing on a battlefield anymore.
No.
It's about these shadowy networks,
Right.
these non-state actors with their own agendas, blurring the lines of traditional warfare.
That's right.
And what about this postmodern warfare I keep hearing about?
Oh, yeah.
Is that part of this new landscape as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So, postmodern warfare really leans heavily on advanced technology,
Okay.
sometimes even blurring the lines between virtual and physical battlefields.
So you're talking cyber attacks.
Yes. Cyber attacks crippling a nation's infrastructure,
Okay.
sophisticated propaganda campaigns swaying public opinion,
Wow.
or drone strikes taking out targets with pinpoint accuracy.
It's like a whole new way of waging war.
It is.
It sounds almost like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it?
But this is the reality of conflict in the 21st century.
This is it.
It's less about brute force
Yeah.
and more about disrupting systems, controlling narratives,
Right.
using technology to achieve strategic objectives.
That's right.
And this evolution in warfare is something that UPSC aspirants
Absolutely.
need to be keenly aware of.
Yes.
Understanding these new dynamics,
Right.
these unconventional tactics and players,
Well, sure.
is essential for analyzing current events and crafting well-informed arguments. It's like the rules of the game are being rewritten before our eyes.
It's true.
So we've got these evolving forms of conflict, these new players and technologies, but the fundamental question remains.
Okay.
Why does war happen in the first place?
Yeah. Why?
Is it just chaos and random violence?
Right.
Or are there some underlying patterns, some recurring explanations that can help us understand this age-old problem?
Well, every conflict has its own unique historical context, of course.
Of course.
But thankfully, our source material offers some insightful frameworks for analyzing the causes of war.
Okay, so we're not totally in the dark.
No.
Good. One prominent framework comes from Kenneth Waltz.
Okay.
And his 3 levels of analysis.
Okay. 3 levels of analysis.
The individual, the state, and the international system.
Okay, so it's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that analogy.
Try to understand what's at the core.
Yeah.
So starting with that individual level.
Okay.
Is this where we get into the whole human nature debate? Yes, this is it.
Okay.
Realists, for instance, often argue that war is rooted in human nature.
Okay.
They point to our innate desire for power, our aggression, our tribal instincts, as evidence that conflict is almost inevitable. Think about Thucydides, an ancient Greek historian.
Yeah.
He wrote about how the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must.
Right. Very bleak view of human nature.
It is.
But it's a perspective that has influenced many thinkers throughout history.
Many thinkers.
It's almost like saying war is in our DNA.
Yeah.
That we're hardwired for conflict.
Right.
I mean, you could even see echoes of this in evolutionary psychology with the whole survival of the fittest concept.
Yeah.
But are we really just prisoners of our genes?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, don't social factors and cultural influences play a role too?
Of course they do.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't just chalk it all up to biology, can we?
We can't.
Okay, good.
You're hitting on a crucial point. While the realist perspective has its merits, it can be overly deterministic.
Okay.
We can't ignore the role of nurture.
Right, the environment.
Right, the way our environment and upbringing shape our behavior.
Makes sense.
And this brings us to Waltz's second level of analysis.
Okay.
The state itself.
All right, the state.
So how can a state's internal characteristics contribute to war?
So it's not just about individual human aggression.
No.
The state itself,
So the state itself.
its internal makeup can play a role.
Exactly.
So are we talking about things like political systems,
Yes.
economic structures,
Yeah.
even cultural values?
All of that.
Okay, wow.
Liberals, for example, often argue that a state's internal structure is a key factor.
Okay.
They point out that democracies,
Okay.
with their emphasis on peaceful conflict resolution and individual rights,
Uh-huh.
are less likely to go to war with each other.
That's the whole democratic peace theory,
Exactly.
which has been a subject of intense debate among scholars.
It have.
On the flip side,
Right.
authoritarian regimes
Yeah.
often rely on militarism,
Yes.
and a culture that glorifies war
Uh-huh.
might be more prone to conflict.
Yeah, there's that argument.
It's like if a state's internal system is built on aggression
Right.
and a constant need for an enemy,
Mm-hmm.
then war becomes almost inevitable.
It can.
But it's not just about political structures, is it?
No, it's not.
What about ideologies,
Yeah.
cultural narratives,
Mm-hmm.
the stories we tell ourselves about who we are
Right.
and who our enemies are?
Exactly.
Don't those play a part too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is where the social constructivist perspective comes in.
Okay, the social constructivists.
Right.
So, what do they say?
Social constructivists argue that ideas and beliefs shape how we see the world,
Okay.
including our perceptions of threat and security.
So it's all about perception.
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
Think about the Cold War.
Okay.
Fueled by intense ideological rivalry between communism and capitalism.
That's a good example.
Or the rise of Nazi Germany.
Right.
Driven by a toxic mix of nationalism, racial superiority,
Right.
and territorial ambitions.
All of that mixed together.
Yeah, a dangerous mix.
So these ideologies,
Right.
these narratives of us versus them,
Yeah.
can be incredibly powerful drivers of conflict.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about material factors like resources or territory.
No.
It's also about the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives that shape our fears and justify our actions.
Exactly.
Wow. So we've got individuals, we've got states,
Yeah.
and now the international system itself.
Right. The big picture.
What's going on at that level?
Well, this is where the neorealists come in.
Okay. The neorealists.
They argue that the very structure of the international system,
Okay.
with its lack of a central authority.
Right. No global police force
Exactly.
creates a security dilemma.
Yeah.
It's like a global game of chess,
It is.
where each state is trying to protect its own interests.
Right.
But in doing so, they might inadvertently threaten others,
Yeah.
leading to this spiral of mistrust and escalation.
Exactly. It's a tough situation.
So since there's no global police force,
Right.
everyone's kind of on their own.
Yeah.
And that constant need to look out for number one can create tension
You can.
and ultimately lead to conflict.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It can be.
You build up your defenses because you're scared,
Yeah.
and then everyone else gets scared because you're building up your defenses.
Right.
And suddenly everyone is on edge and ready to fight.
That's the security dilemma.
And this security dilemma is further complicated by economic factors,
Right.
which are central to the Marxist interpretation of war.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Marxists,
Yeah.
they view war as a product of capitalist competition,
Uh-huh.
a struggle for resources, markets, and economic dominance.
That's the core of it.
So for them, it all boils down to economics.
In essence, yes.
Okay.
They see war as a tool used by the capitalist class. Okay.
To maintain their power and exploit others.
Okay.
Think about colonialism, for instance,
Okay.
where European powers carved up the globe in a relentless pursuit of resources and markets.
Right.
Or modern-day conflicts fueled by competition over oil, minerals, or access to strategic trade routes.
It's like that saying, follow the money and you'll find the root of the problem.
Exactly.
So economic factors,
Yeah.
whether it's competition for resources,
Mhm.
the pursuit of profit,
Right.
or the desire to control key markets,
Yeah.
can be a powerful engine driving conflict.
They can be.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From individual aggression
Uh-huh.
to state characteristics
Yes.
to the anarchic nature of the international system.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect storm of factors that can lead to war.
It can be.
But before we get too overwhelmed,
Okay.
are there any signs that things might be changing?
That's a great question.
Is there any hope for a less war-prone world?
Well, let's discuss that. So we've established that war is this complex beast
It is.
with this tangled web of causes.
Yeah.
But is it all doom and gloom?
Wow.
Are we destined to just keep repeating these cycles of violence throughout history?
It's a good question.
I mean, our source material did mention
Yeah.
that some of those economic theories of war,
Uh-huh.
especially the Marxist perspective,
Right.
might be less dominant in the post-1945 world.
That's a good point.
So what's changed?
Well, the idea that capitalist expansion inevitably leads to war,
Okay.
it seems to have lost some traction, especially with the rise of globalization and international trade.
Right. So instead of conquering territories for resources,
Yeah.
many countries now focus on economic cooperation and interdependence.
It's a different approach.
So it's not a perfect system,
No system is.
but it suggests that maybe, just maybe,
Yeah,
there's hope for a less war-prone world.
there's always hope.
So instead of grabbing land and resources through brute force, it's more about economic partnerships and global trade networks.
Right, creating those connections.
So it's like the world is becoming more interconnected.
It is.
And that might actually be a good thing for peace.
It could be.
But even if traditional interstate wars are becoming less common,
Right.
we still see plenty of conflict in the world.
We do.
Like we were just talking about those new wars
Yeah.
and unconventional warfare. So what else can you tell us about these emerging forms of conflict?
Well, one key characteristic of new wars
Okay.
is this blurring of lines between combatants.
Okay. The lines are getting blurred.
They are.
Okay.
We're seeing more and more non-state actors
Right.
taking center stage.
So you've got guerrilla groups,
Guerrilla groups,
terrorist organizations,
terrorist organizations,
paramilitary forces.
all of them.
Okay.
These groups often operate outside the traditional rules of war.
So there are no rules,
Well, there are rules.
but they're not following them,
Exactly.
which makes these conflicts incredibly difficult to contain and resolve.
It does.
And because they don't necessarily adhere to the same codes of conduct
Right.
as traditional armies,
Yeah,
the impact on civilians can be absolutely devastating.
it can be.
It's a far cry from the somewhat cleaner battles of the past.
That's for sure.
So civilians are often caught in the crossfire,
Unfortunately, yes.
becoming victims of violence, displacement,
Yeah.
human rights abuses.
It's a grim reality.
And the tactics employed can be brutal and unconventional.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking suicide bombings,
Yeah.
kidnappings, the use of child soldiers.
It's a tough topic.
It's a grim reality that we have to confront.
We do.
And what about the motives behind these new wars?
Okay.
Are they still primarily about territory or resources?
Well, territory and resources can certainly be motivating factors, but we're also seeing a rise in conflicts driven by ethnic or religious tensions.
Right. So identity is playing a bigger role.
It is. And often these tensions are intertwined with political and economic grievances.
So it's complex.
Very complex.
It's not just about drawing lines on a map or
yeah.
driving oil fields anymore.
There's more to it.
It's about identity politics, the struggle for self-determination, and often this potent mix of historical grievances
Right.
and present-day inequalities.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
And the involvement of non-state actors,
Right.
often with transnational networks and ideologies.
Yeah. It further complicates the picture.
It does.
I mean, imagine a terrorist organization operating across borders,
Right.
using social media to recruit and radicalize,
Yeah.
and carrying out attacks that reverberate far beyond the immediate conflict zone.
It's a new kind of challenge.
It's like trying to fight a ghost.
In a way.
An enemy that doesn't play by the traditional rules and can strike anywhere, anytime.
It's a tough situation.
And how do these new wars tie into that idea of postmodern warfare we touched on earlier?
Well, postmodern warfare often refers to conflicts
Okay.
where technology and information play a central role,
Okay.
blurring the lines between the virtual and the physical.
So cyber attacks.
Cyber attacks crippling a nation's infrastructure.
Right.
Sophisticated propaganda campaigns shaping public opinion.
Yeah.
Or drones carrying out targeted killings with chilling precision.
It's like war is becoming less about tanks and trenches.
Yeah, less about those traditional images.
And more about algorithms and narratives.
Right, it's a different kind of battlefield.
Exactly. And this shift has profound implications for how we understand war and peace.
It does.
The battlefields are no longer clearly defined,
No, they're not.
and the weapons can be as intangible as a line of code or a carefully crafted message.
Yeah,
It's a new era of conflict,
it is.
one that demands new ways of thinking and responding.
But we have to adapt.
So it's almost like we're in a constant state of flux,
Yeah, things are changing rapidly.
where the very definition of war is evolving.
It is.
And our strategies for preventing and resolving conflict
Yeah,
need to adapt as well.
they do.
And that brings us back to the question we left off with earlier.
Okay.
Is there any hope for a less war-prone world?
big question.
I mean, we talked about the potential of economic interdependence and globalization
Right.
as deterrents to traditional interstate wars. But what about these new forms of conflict?
Yeah, what about those?
How do we even begin to address those challenges?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It feels like it.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
I figured.
But understanding the complexities of these new wars,
Okay.
the motivations behind them,
Uh-huh.
the tactics used,
Right.
and the players involved
Right.
is a crucial first step.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly.
We need to move beyond traditional models of conflict resolution
Yeah, those aren't always effective anymore.
and develop strategies that can address these evolving threats.
New threats need new solutions.
So it's not just about diplomacy and peace treaties anymore.
Yeah, it's more than that.
It's about cybersecurity,
Yes.
counterterrorism efforts,
Uh-huh.
addressing root causes like inequality and political exclusion,
Those are crucial.
and maybe even rethinking the very nature of sovereignty.
Interesting point.
In a world where borders seem increasingly porous,
Right. Those lines are blurring.
you're hitting on all the key points.
I'm trying to.
It's a multifaceted challenge
It is.
that demands a comprehensive approach.
A lot of moving parts.
And while it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale and complexity of the problem,
It is a big problem.
remember that knowledge is power. The
Absolutely.
more we understand about these evolving forms of conflict,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped we'll be to address them.
Knowledge is our best tool.
It's like having a toolkit.
I like that analogy.
And the more tools we have in that toolkit,
Yeah.
the better our chances of finding the right approach
Mm-hmm.
for each specific situation.
Exactly the right tool for the job.
But where does this toolkit come from?
Good question.
How do we equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills
Right.
to navigate this complex world of conflict and cooperation?
Well, that's where resources like the text we're discussing today come in.
Oh, okay.
They provide that foundational knowledge,
Yeah.
the theoretical frameworks,
Ah.
and the historical context
Right.
that are essential for understanding international relations.
So it's like having a roadmap,
Yeah, a guide.
a guide to help us make sense of the tangled web of global politics.
That's a good way to put it.
And for our UPSC aspirants out there,
Yes,
this deep dive is particularly relevant.
absolutely.
Understanding these concepts, these
Mhm.
different perspectives on war and peace,
Right.
it's crucial for acing those exams.
They will help.
And more importantly,
Yeah.
for becoming informed and engaged citizens.
That's the goal.
It's about going beyond memorizing facts and dates.
It is.
It's about developing the analytical skills
Uh-huh.
and critical thinking abilities that will allow you to dissect real-world situations and offer insightful solutions.
That's what we need.
And that's what this deep dive is all about.
I agree.
Giving you the tools and the knowledge
Uh-huh.
to navigate this complex and ever-changing landscape of war and peace.
It's a valuable skill.
It is.
And remember, this is just a starting point.
Right.
There's a wealth of knowledge out there waiting to be explored.
So much to learn.
Yeah.
So keep reading,
Uh-huh.
keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep diving deeper into these fascinating and crucial topics.
That's the key.
Well said.
Thank you.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to touch on something we briefly mentioned earlier, the use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons.
Right.
It's a chilling thought,
It is,
but one that we can't afford to ignore,
especially in today's world.
especially in today's world.
Yeah.
The potential use of these weapons of mass destruction
Mm-hmm.
represents a terrifying category of unconventional warfare. Their indiscriminate and devastating effects
Right.
raise profound ethical, strategic, and humanitarian concerns.
Very serious concerns.
It's like a Pandora's box
Yeah.
that, once opened,
Right.
could have unimaginable consequences for humanity.
It's a scary thought.
It is. So how do we even begin to grapple with this threat?
That's the big question.
What steps can the international community take
Yeah.
to prevent the unthinkable from happening?
Well, that's a question that deserves its own deep dive.
It does.
And perhaps we can explore it in a future episode.
Maybe we should.
But for now, I think it's important to acknowledge the gravity of the threat
Okay.
and to highlight the ongoing efforts
Right.
through international treaties and organizations
Uh-huh.
to control the spread of these weapons and
Right.
prevent their use.
So those efforts are ongoing.
They are.
It's a reminder that while we've been focusing on these new wars
Yeah.
and evolving forms of conflict, the threat posed by these weapons of mass destruction hasn't gone away.
It hasn't.
It's a sobering thought,
It is.
but one that underscores the importance of understanding all facets of war and peace
Absolutely.
in the 21st century.
It's a complex landscape,
It is.
and it highlights the need for continued dialogue,
Okay.
cooperation, and a commitment to finding peaceful solutions to global challenges.
Yeah, we need to keep working at it.
We do. The stakes are incredibly high,
They are.
and we can't afford to be complacent.
No, we can't. This has been heavy stuff, but it's so important,
I agree.
especially for those of you out there getting ready for the UPSC exams.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, thinking about everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
it really strikes me that understanding these different perspectives on war
Uh-huh.
isn't just about acing a test.
It's bigger than that.
It is.
It is.
It's about equipping ourselves to be informed citizens,
right.
to critically evaluate all the information that we're bombarded with these days,
There's so much out there.
and to really engage in meaningful conversations about these complex issues.
Those conversations are so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's like we've been given this decoder ring
I like that.
to help us decipher the complexities of global politics.
It's a good way to look at it.
And for those of you prepping for the UTSC,
Yeah,
think of this knowledge as your secret weapon,
absolutely.
being able to weave these theories and concepts into your answers
Uh-huh.
to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of war and peace.
Yeah, that's what they're looking for.
That's what they're looking for.
Yes,
It'll definitely set you apart.
it will.
It will.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
is there a final thought-provoking question we can leave our listeners with? Something for them to really ponder
Let me think.
as they continue their exploration of this fascinating, albeit often troubling subject.
Well, given our conversation about how war is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
how about this? With technology constantly reshaping the landscape of war, blurring the lines between the physical and the virtual, and with the rise of these non-state actors and unconventional tactics,
Yeah.
what does the future hold for how we prevent and resolve these devastating events?
It's a big question
It is a huge question.
with no easy answers.
Not at all.
But it's one that we, as a global community,
Right.
really need to grapple with.
We have to.
The stakes are incredibly high,
They are.
and the choices that we make today
Right now,
are going to shape the world of tomorrow.
that's the truth.
So it's crucial to keep learning,
Yes,
to keep questioning,
for sure.
and to keep engaging in these critical conversations.
Those conversations are essential.
They are. The
Yeah.
more informed we are,
Right.
the better equipped we'll be
Absolutely.
to navigate the complexities of the 21st century
Yeah,
and to strive for a future where peace prevails.
that's the goal.
Well said. On that note, we want to thank you all for joining us
Yes, thank you.
on this deep dive into the complexities of war and peace.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful,
Me too.
engaging, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. And for those of you embarking on the UPSC journey,
Yes, good luck.
we wish you the very best in your preparations.
You got this.
Remember, knowledge is power,
It is.
and critical thinking is your greatest asset.
Couldn't agree more.
And don't forget to like and subscribe
Yes, please do.
for more in-depth explorations of these key topics.
We'll have more coming soon.
And feel free to share this episode with anyone who might find it valuable.
Spread the knowledge.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
See you then.